Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are tuning our instruments, we are checking the mic levels, and we are getting ready to open a file that I have been absolutely dying to get into.
I've been looking forward to this one.
We're looking at a band that, by all conventional logic, really shouldn't have worked. They were too weird for the radio, too pop for the punks, and maybe a little too anxious for the cool kids.
It is a fascinating case study. You're absolutely right. We're looking at a group that managed to exist between genres, between business models, and even between breakups in a way that very few artists ever managed to navigate.
Yeah.
They didn't just survive the music industry's most volatile era. They essentially, they hacked it.
They did. They totally hacked it. They pulled off a literal heist of their own music from a major label, which we will absolutely get into. They, predicted the creator economy a decade before YouTube was even a thing.
For sure. They were so ahead of the curve on that.
And they managed to break up, reunite, and then kind of break up again without ever losing that die-hard connection with their audience. It's really something else.
It's a masterclass in artistic integrity,
Yeah.
and doing things your own way. We are, of course, talking about the Dismemberment Plan.
The Dismemberment Plan. And before we get into the music or the industry politics, which, spoiler alert, includes that heist I mentioned, we have to start with a name.
You have to.
Because if you were walking through a record store in, say, 1995, and you saw a CD labeled The Dismemberment Plan, you might think, okay, what is this? Scandinavian death metal.
Right. Or, some kind of Norwegian grindcore, something aggressive.
Exactly. It sounds violent. It sounds like something that involves fake blood and, spikes on stage.
But that's not it at all. Not even close.
Not even close. It's actually a reference to one of the greatest comedy films of the 90s. We were talking about Groundhog Day.
That's right. The 1993 Bill Murray classic.
Yeah.
A perfect movie.
It really is. So for anyone who needs a refresher, picture the scene. Bill Murray is Phil Connors. He's trapped in this time loop, reliving the same day over and over and over.
And every single morning, without fail, he runs into this guy, Ned Ryerson.
Ned the head. Am I right or am I right or am I right?
The insurance salesman? Probably one of the most memorably annoying characters in film history.
Oh, for sure. And he's just badgering Bill Murray, just pitching every possible insurance product under the sun. It's this rapid-fire monologue. Single premium life, term life, whole life.
And you can just see Bill Murray's soul leaving his body as it's happening.
And buried in that pitch, just a total throwaway line, he offers him the Dismemberment Plan.
It's such a brilliant blink and you miss it moment of dialogue. It's corporate jargon that's designed to sound both terrifying and completely mundane at the same time.
Right. It's a policy for, losing a limb, but he sells it like it's a toaster oven.
It's just another product on the list.
And the band heard that line and apparently just went, that's it, that's our name. They've said it's darkly funny, and it just stuck.
And fans eventually just shortened it, right, to The Plan or D Plan.
Yeah, The Plan or D Plan, which sounds so much more organized and tactical.
Yeah, it sounds like a spy movie or something.
But the origin is literally Bill Murray being harassed by an insurance agent about losing his legs.
And in a way, that origin story, that name, it just encapsulates the band perfectly, doesn't it? They took something standard, a rock band setup, and twisted it into something eccentric, a little bit neurotic, and just deeply memorable.
That's a perfect way to put it. That juxtaposition of the terrifying and the mundane.
Yeah.
So let's orient everyone. Who are we dealing with here? The Dismemberment Plan is a seminal American indie rock band from Washington, D.C.
And they formed, fittingly enough, on New Year's Day, January 1st, 1993.
I love that detail. It puts them right in the middle of a really specific cultural moment in D.C. And, that specific date seems so right for a band that would go on to write so much about time and anxiety and new beginnings.
Oh, for sure. And if you try to pin down their genre, well, good luck.
Right. You see indie rock,
yeah,
obviously. But then you see dance punk. You see math rock. Let's break that last one down for a second. When we say math rock, we're not talking about songs about algebra, are we?
No, though with this band's lyrical style, maybe you're getting close. No, math rock refers to music that uses complex, atypical rhythmic structures. Most rock music is in a very standard 44 time. You can tap your foot to it. 1, 2, 3, 4.
It's comfortable. It's predictable.
Exactly. Math rock just completely disrupts that. It starts and stops in weird places. It uses time signatures like 78 or 54.
Yeah.
It feels angular, jagged. It almost forces you to count along to figure out what's happening.
It definitely keeps you on your toes. You can't just nod your head mindlessly.
You can't. But what made the Dismemberment Plan so special, and this is really the core of their genius, was that they took that intellectual mathematical complexity and they somehow made it danceable. They made it feel like pop music.
Yeah.
It was this weird, amazing fusion. And that unique sound is what set them up for this incredible story. They're famous for slipping through the cracks of the major label system.
Oh, the slipping through the cracks story is just legendary. We're going to spend a lot of time on that.
We have to. And, they cultivated this diehard fan base not through massive radio play, but through really unique and, frankly, ahead of their time engagement. They broke up right when they were at their creative peak.
Which is such a classic rock and roll tragedy.
It is, but then they successfully reunited multiple times. So today, we're going to rely on the band's detailed history, their discography, touring logs, all of it, to really map out how this bizarre, brilliant career happened.
All right, so let's rewind the tape. Let's go back to Northern Virginia in the early 90s. Segment 1, Origins and the DC sound. Who's in this band?
Well, the core lineup that most people know, the classic lineup, consists of Eric Axelson on bass, Jason Cadell on guitar, and the frontman, Travis Morrison, on vocals and guitar.
And the drummer, Joe Easley.
Right, but Joe wasn't the original drummer. Originally, it was a guy named Steve Cummings.
Okay, but the connection here goes back way before the band officially formed on that New Year's Day, right? This isn't a situation where your manager put an ad in the paper.
Oh, no, absolutely not. These guys had deep roots. They all knew each other from high school, specifically Lake Braddock Secondary School in Burke, Virginia.
I love that. It's the classic friends from high school starting a band story. There's just something about that dynamic, isn't there? You develop a shorthand, a way of communicating that you just can't replicate with, hired guns.
It provides a level of chemistry you can't fake, and you can hear it in the music. The way the bass and guitar lock in together, that comes from years of playing together in garages and basements. They formed the band officially while they were in college, but that foundation was laid in the hallways of Lake Braddock.
So, Steve Cummings, the original drummer, he was there for the beginning.
He was. He played on their debut album, which is titled Just an Exclamation Point.
Which is a complete and total nightmare for search engines, by the way.
Oh, it's impossible.
Try Googling exclamation point album and see what you get. You'll get, Panic at the Disco or something.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to find if you don't know exactly what you're looking for.
It's a very pre-internet band name for an album, but after that record, Cummings left. And this is a really pivotal moment because, usually when a founding member, especially the drummer, leaves that early on, it can destabilize a band. It changes the entire rhythmic DNA.
Right. The engine of the band is gone.
It is. But in this case, the change was arguably for the better. They brought in Joe Easley.
And Joe Easley is just a monster behind the kit. A completely different kind of player.
He really is. His style is so intricate, but also so powerful. Joe Easley joining the band is what really cemented what fans consider the classic lineup. And this is where we start to hear that truly unique D-Plan sound emerge. The chemistry just clicked into place.
It did. So let's talk about that sound. You mentioned math rock and dance punk. When I listen to the band, particularly the stuff after Joe joined, I hear a lot of anxiety, but danceable anxiety.
That is a perfect description. Emo-tinged is another label that gets thrown around a lot, especially from that era, but it's just too simple for them.
Yeah, it doesn't really fit.
It doesn't capture the whole picture, because if you really listen to the rhythms, especially with what Joe Easley is doing on drums and what Eric Axelson is doing on bass, there is a heavy, heavy influence of R&B and dance music. It's funky. The bass lines are melodic and propulsive.
Which is pretty unusual for a bunch of indie rock kids from the D.C. suburbs in the 90s, isn't it?
Yeah.
That wasn't really the sound of the moment.
It was incredibly distinct. You have to remember the context. The Washington, D.C. music scene in the 90s was completely dominated by Discord Records.
Yeah, Fugazi.
Yeah.
Jawbox. Shudder to think.
Exactly. It was the post-hardcore, post-punk revival. It was serious music. It was political. It had a strong ethical compass. There was this whole DIY ethos.
And the shows were often very stoic. It was very stand still, fold your arms, and nod your head appreciably sometimes.
Exactly. It was intense. It was cathartic, but it wasn't necessarily fun in a dance party kind of way.
Yeah.
And the Dismemberment Plan took that post-hardcore energy, the intensity, the volume, the jagged guitars, and they injected this offbeat, rhythmic, almost joyous quality into it.
They wanted you to move.
They absolutely wanted you to move. Travis Morrison's stage presence was and is manic. He's dancing, he's flailing. They weren't just rock. They were incorporating experimental textures, keyboards, samplers, and his his vocals. They weren't just shouting.
No, it's this whole range. Sometimes he's singing these really beautiful melodies, and then suddenly he's almost rapping or just talking in this frantic stream of consciousness style.
The lyrics are so specific and strange,
Yeah.
full of these little mundane details of life that suddenly feel epic and terrifying.
It feels like the musical equivalent of having a panic attack at a disco.
That's it. That is the perfect summary. It's like they took the raw, nervous energy of punk, but the structural complexity and groove of like Prince or Talking Heads, and just mashed it all together into something new.
And that willingness to blend genres, to be uncool in a very cool way, is what set them up for the drama that was about to unfold with the actual music industry.
It really is. They were too weird to be easily categorized, which made them a very risky bet for a big corporation.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this is my favorite part of the story. Segment 2, the Interscope incident, or as I like to call it, the Great Rock and Roll Heist.
It really is a heist story. And it's one of the most fascinating and, frankly, funniest business stories in indie rock history. So to set the stage, the band starts out recording for DeSoto Records.
Which is a cool, respected, independent DC label. It was owned by members of the band Jawbox, right?
That's right. So they were among friends, part of the DC community. But in the late 90s, you have this alternative gold rush still happening.
The post-Nirvana explosion.
Exactly. Nevermind had changed everything earlier in the decade, and major labels were still scrambling to sign anything with a distorted guitar and a flannel shirt. They were handing out these huge contracts like candy, trying to find the next big thing.
They were just throwing money at walls to see what would stick.
Mm.
And they didn't care where it came from. A weird band from DC. Sure, why not?
Precisely. So the Dismemberment Plan, this quirky, funky, anxious band, gets signed to Interscope Records.
And Interscope is a massive label. This is Dr. Dre, Nine Inch Nails, no doubt. This is the big time.
This is the major leagues. They release an EP on Interscope called The Ice of Boston.
The Ice of Boston is such a great track. I have to pause on it because it captures their whole personality so perfectly. It's basically just Travis Morrison rambling over this groovy track about being lonely in Boston on New Year's Eve.
Right, he's drinking champagne by himself, watching the tea in the harbor. It's hilarious, it's deeply sad, and it's incredibly catchy all at once.
It's that neurotic storytelling style. So, here's the setup. They are on the payroll of a major corporation. They have a budget. They go into the studio to record their breakthrough album. This is supposed to be the big one.
This is Emergency and I.
Of their masterpiece.
And they record it with a major label budget. We are talking high-quality production, months in a professional studio, the best gear, the works. They are spending the corporation's money to make their art with very little oversight, it seems.
There's always a but with major labels in the 90s, isn't there?
Always. Shortly after they complete the album, the entire industry shifts. There is a massive corporate merger between Universal and Polygram. Interscope was part of this.
And what happens in a merger?
It's a corporate bloodbath. Redundancies, restructuring. Entire departments are wiped out. And hundreds of bands, the smaller, riskier signings, get dropped from the label rosters.
They just cleaned house.
They clean house. And the Dismemberment Plan was one of the bands on the chopping block.
So usually this is where the story ends in tragedy, right? The band gets dropped, but the label owns the master tapes because they paid for the recording, and the album just sits in a vault forever. It's called label limbo.
That is the standard, heartbreaking story for so many bands from that era. Not only is your album shelved, but you, the artist, often owe the label all the money they spent on you. The recording costs, the video budgets, the tour support. It's a debt you can never repay.
And you can't re-record the songs for another label for a certain number of years because of clauses in the contract. You're just stuck.
You're completely stuck. It has destroyed countless careers. But the Dismemberment Plan, specifically their management and the good folks at their old label DeSoto, pulled off something truly miraculous.
The heist.
The heist. They managed to negotiate their departure from Interscope, and they took the completed album with them. They walked out the door with the master tapes of Emergency and I.
Okay, wait, let me make sure I understand this completely. They got Interscope, this giant corporation, to pay for the entire recording of their masterpiece.
Yes.
A major label budget.
And then when Interscope dropped them, they just left with the tapes.
Yes. They took the album back to their indie label, DeSoto Records, for release.
But what about the debt? Did they owe Interscope all that money for the studio time?
No. This is the truly insane part.
Yeah.
They had no debt to the major label. They walked away free and cleared. They essentially recorded a major label budget album and got to release it independently with zero financial consequences.
That is unbelievable. That's like getting a bank to build you a mansion and the bank just hands you the keys and tears up the mortgage because they're too busy firing the loan officer to care. That's a perfect analogy. The band later described it simply as slipping through the cracks. It was such a chaotic time in the industry. Executives were getting fired and rehired, entire A&R departments were being shuffled around, files were getting lost. In the grand scheme of this multi-billion-dollar merger, the Dismemberment Plan was just a tiny line item that nobody was paying attention to.
They were a rounding error.
They were a rounding error, and in that confusion, their team was savvy enough to secure their freedom and, crucially, the rights to their own art.
Wow, that phrase, slipping through the cracks, it's so key to their whole story. Because if they hadn't slipped through, if that album had been shelved,
We might not be talking about them today, honestly, because Emergency and I, released in 1999 on DeSoto, became their critically acclaimed masterpiece. It's the album that defined them. If that record had been locked away in a vault or tampered with by corporate A&R guys trying to find a hit single, their entire trajectory would have been different.
it would have been destroyed. Instead, they got to make the exact record they wanted on someone else's dime and release it on their own terms.
It's the ultimate indie rock dream.
So they escaped the Death Star with the plans, pun fully intended, and they released Emergency and I. This brings us to segment 3, the peep years, from about 1999 to 2002.
This is the golden era. Emergency and I comes out in 99, and the critical reception is just rapturous. Pitchfork gives it a 9.6. College radio is all over it. The indie press, what was then the blogosphere, everyone loved this record.
And then they followed up with Change in 2001, a very different sounding album, much more somber and mature in a lot of ways.
It is. It's less frantic, more introspective, but also brilliant. And critically, these two albums raised their profile significantly.
So the critical darlings. Were they selling millions of records? Were they buying sports cars?
No, and that's a really important distinction to make. We are talking about critical and cultural success versus massive commercial success. By the time the band eventually broke up a few years later, each of those albums, Emergency and I and Change, had sold roughly 22,000 copies in the U.S.
Okay, so 22,000. In the grand scheme of things, compared to SYNC or Britney Spears, who were selling millions a week at that time, that's a rounding error.
It is tiny commercially, but in the indie world, that's a success. 22,000 loyal fans who buy the record, come to every show and buy a T-shirt. That is a sustainable career that allows you to keep touring and making music. And their cultural profile was much, much higher than those sales figures might suggest.
And they were getting some absolutely insane touring opportunities based on that reputation. I was looking through the logs here. Pearl Jam.
Yes. In the year 2000, they were invited to open for the entire European leg of Pearl Jam's tour.
That is a massive platform. Pearl Jam fills arenas and stadiums.
Yeah.
But that feels like a really weird mismatch, doesn't it?
It's a huge mismatch on paper. You have Pearl Jam, who are this earnest, classic rock grunge institution. Eddie Vedder is this icon of sincerity.
Right. And then you have the Dismemberment Plan coming out, playing this frantic, synth-heavy dance punk song about urban alienation in 78 time.
It must have been a real culture clash for those audiences. Imagine you're in a stadium in Italy waiting to hear Even Flow, and instead you get this band with a song called The City, where Travis Morrison is just yelping about his life.
It must have been a trial by fire. But what an opportunity. It exposed them to tens of thousands of people who never would have stepped foot in a tiny DC punk club.
Absolutely. And then, arguably, an even more fitting and more important tour happened in 2002.
The Death and Dismemberment Tour.
The legendary name.
They co-headlined with Death Cab for Cutie.
This was a brilliant move, a stroke of genius, really. You have Death Cab, who are just on the cusp of breaking huge with their melodic, deeply emotional indie rock. And you have the Dismemberment Plan. The names just fit together perfectly.
Death and Dismemberment. It sounds like an insurance claim again.
It does. But it was this perfect pairing that cross-pollinated their fan bases. If you liked the incredibly detailed, emotional lyricism of Ben Gibbard, you found something to love in Travis Morrison's lyrics. If you liked the jagged, high-energy musicality of D-Plan, maybe you learned to appreciate the subtle craft of Death Cab.
It was the perfect Venn diagram of sad, smart college kids in the early 2000s.
It really was. And it forged these creative ties between the bands that lasted for years. It solidified both of their places as leaders of that indie rock scene.
Now, speaking of being leaders and being ahead of the curve, we have to talk about something they did in 2002 that I think just proves they were living in the future. The remix experiment.
This is one of my favorite details about the band because it shows how incredibly forward-thinking they were. You have to put yourself back in 2002. The internet was not what it is today. There was no SoundCloud, no Bandcamp. Social media was barely a concept. Many people were still on dial-up modems.
And the music industry was terrified of the internet. Napster had just been shut down. The RIAA was suing 12-year-old kids for downloading MP3s. Digital music was the enemy.
Exactly. The industry was in full-on panic mode, trying to lock everything down. And in the middle of that hostile climate, what does the Dismemberment Plan do? They upload the raw music tracks, the stems from the two most beloved albums, Emergency and I and Change, to their website for free.
Can you explain stems for any listener who might not be a music producer?
Sure. Stems are the isolated individual tracks that make up a song. So you'd have just the vocal track, just the drum track, just the bass line, just the keyboard part, all separated.
So they gave the actual raw building blocks of their art to the public.
Right. And they put out a call to action. They said, here are the pieces, remix our songs, do whatever you want with them, chop them up, add new beats, turn a rock song into a techno track, go wild.
That is so risky. From a traditional standpoint, you're basically handing your art over to strangers.
Yeah.
You're completely losing control of it.
But that's the point. They trusted their fans. They saw the internet not as a threat, but as a community. And it worked. The fans responded in a huge way. And the result was an entire album released in 2003 called A People's History of the Dismemberment Plan.
A People's History. A great nod to the Howard Zinn book. Very DC intellectual of them.
Very on brand. But think about the level of engagement here. They weren't just broadcasting to their fans, they were actively collaborating with them. This was Web 2.0 behavior in a Web 1.0 world. They were building an online community before that was a marketing buzzword.
It turned the listeners into participants, into creators. That kind of connection creates a loyalty that you just can't buy with billboard ads or magazine covers.
Absolutely. And that deep, abiding loyalty would be tested very, very soon because just as they were riding this incredible wave of creativity and touring success, everything came to a sudden halt.
Segment 4. The breakup. It's January 19, 2003.
A dark day for D-Plan fans. The band posts a message on their website announcing they are going to break up. They promised a few final tours to say goodbye, but the writing was on the wall. The plan was over.
Why? Why break up then? They're co-headlining the Death and Dismemberment Tour. They're releasing innovative remix albums. They have this devoted fan base. There were no reports of massive infighting or drug scandals.
It seems to be the classic and in some ways most respectable reason, quit while you're ahead. They felt they had said what they needed to say as a unit. They didn't want to become a band that just churns out mediocre albums to pay the bills. They wanted to preserve the integrity of what they had built.
I can respect that. It's better to burn out than fade away, as they say.
Yeah.
But the way they went out, the final show drama, this is straight out of a movie script.
It is. It's almost too perfect.
Yeah.
So the plan was to have the final show on July 28, 2003, and they chose a very specific, very meaningful venue, Fort Reno Park in D.C.
Fort Reno is legendary. It's an outdoor public space. They have free shows all summer. It's very DIY, very punk rock. It represents the whole ethos of the D.C. music scene.
It's the heart and soul of the D.C. summer concert scene. But the key words are outdoors and summer in D.C.
No. I know where this is going. The weather in D.C. in July is either a sweltering swamp or a biblical thunderstorm. There is no in-between.
And on that night, it was the thunderstorm. A heavy rainstorm rolled in. We aren't talking a little drizzle. We are talking a complete deluge. And the stage at Fort Reno is not exactly a state-of-the-art covered amphitheater.
Right. It's basically a concrete slab.
And it threatened to destroy all their electronic gear. Remember, this is a band that uses samplers and keyboards. Water and high-voltage electricity do not mix well.
So the fans are there, standing in the mud in the pouring rain, waiting for the last show ever, and the sky just opens up.
It was chaotic. Most fans were actually driven off by the weather. They tried to play, but they couldn't do their full set. It was truncated, it was messy, and it felt unresolved, incomplete.
You can't end a 10-year career on a rainout. That's just too depressing. It feels like a cosmic joke.
Precisely. And the band realized this wasn't the way to say goodbye. This wasn't the closure that they or their fans deserved. So they added one more show, the real finale.
September 1/3, 2003.
And they did it right. They booked the legendary 9.3 Euro Club in D.C.
The holy grail of DC venues, the
Yeah.
perfect place for a send-off.
They dubbed it the One Last Slice show.
One last slice. I assume that's another Groundhog Day reference. Or maybe they just wanted pizza.
It's actually a lyric from one of their songs, The Jitters, but it fits that vibe perfectly, just grabbing one last moment. The show was, of course, completely sold out. It was emotional, it was sweaty, it was cathartic, it was the proper closure that everyone needed. And then that was it. Silence.
The Dismemberment Plan was no more. Which brings us to segment 5. The post-breakup era, from 2003 to about 2010. What happens when the music stops and the members have to figure out what's next?
Well, life goes on. But the members, being creative people, didn't stop making music. Travis Morrison, the frontman, had a batch of songs that were originally intended for a post-Change D-Plan album. Since the band was done, he took those songs and released them on his solo debut, Travistan, in 2004.
Travistan. Now,
Yeah.
we have to address the elephant in the room here. That album got, let's say, mixed reviews, didn't it?
It was incredibly polarizing, and mixed is being very generous in some corners of the music press. The influential website Pitchfork famously gave it a 0.0 rating.
0.0. That is aggressive. That's not just, we didn't like it. That's a statement of contempt.
It was incredibly harsh, and to be fair, the album was very weird. It was experimental, it was quirky, and it lacked the tight, cohesive energy of the full band. It definitely alienated some people who were just hoping for Emergency and I Part 2.
Right.
But others found it charming and interesting. It's a fascinating artifact of that time, and it really shows you how powerful and, frankly, brutal music criticism could be back then.
Meanwhile, Eric Axelson, the bassist, went in a completely different direction. He formed a new band called Maritime.
Oh, I remember Maritime. They were great.
Yeah, he teamed up with former members of the Promise Ring.
Another legendary band from the emo scene. That is basically a supergroup for sad indie rock kids of that era.
Totally. And Maritime sound was very different. It was much more melodic, more straightforward indie pop. They released a string of really solid albums. Glass Floor in 2004, We the Vehicles in 2006, Heresy and the Hotel Choir in 2007. They had a really good run.
It was much less chaotic than D-Plan. More polished, more mature in a way. It showed a different side of Axelson as a musician.
So everyone is busy. They're pursuing their own projects. And during this time, usually, reporters are constantly asking, when is the reunion? Are you guys getting back together? What was the official stance?
Travis Morrison was quoted pretty definitively during this period. He said the band probably wouldn't get back together except to drink beer.
Which is the most relatable reason to get back together with your high school friends, to be fair.
It is. It seemed very clear. They were still friends, but the musical project was over, done, finished. Until 2007.
The one-off reunion.
This wasn't a cash grab. This wasn't a nostalgia tour. This was for a very serious cause. It was a charity concert benefiting Callum Robbins.
That's the son of Jay Robbins, right, from the band Jawbox.
Yes. Jay Robbins was their label mate on DeSoto. He'd produced for them. He was a huge figure in the DC scene. His young son was diagnosed with a serious health condition, and the community rallied around the family to help with medical bills. The Dismemberment Plan agreed to play one show at the Black Cat nightclub in D.C. to raise money.
Just one show. And the reaction must have been insane.
It was immediate and overwhelming. Tickets sold out in minutes. The demand was so high they actually had to add a second show the night before just to handle the overflow.
Wow.
The reaction was, as the reports say, overwhelmingly positive. It proved that even after 4 years of silence, the fan base hadn't gone anywhere. They were just dormant, waiting.
But that was just a one-off for charity, right?
Right.
They played the two shows, raised the money, and then went back to their separate lives.
Correct. It was a beautiful moment for the community, but it wasn't a full-blown reunion. That wouldn't happen for another 3 years.
All right, segment 6. The Uncanny Return. From 2010 to 2015. I do love that pun.
It is a good pun. So we jump forward to 2010. Rumors start swirling. And then the Washington Post reports it. The band is reuniting for a tour.
And the reason, or the catalyst, was the vinyl reissue of Emergency and I, right?
Yes. Barsic Records was doing a high-quality deluxe reissue of the album. The band decided to get back together to play some shows to support it. But Eric Axelson was very, very cautious in the press at the time. He gave an interview where he explicitly said, "We're not planning a new record." He said they were just taking it day by day.
The classic manage expectations move. Don't promise anything you can't deliver.
Exactly. But the tour was a massive triumph. They kicked the whole thing off by playing on Late Night with Jimmy Fallon.
Which is a huge national stage, a far cry from a rainy park in D.C.
For sure. They played sold-out shows at the 9.30 Club and the Black Cat again. They played major festivals like the Pitchfork Music Festival in Chicago and the Roots Picnic in Philadelphia. And unlike a lot of nostalgia acts that get back together and just kind of phone it in, by all accounts, they sounded tighter and more energetic than ever.
And usually, these reunion tours are just that. You play the hits, collect the check, and go home. But something shifted around 2012.
The creative itch came back. In August of 2012, they booked a couple of small, low-key shows in Baltimore and Fredericksburg, Virginia.
Sweaty shows, as they call them.
Exactly. Small clubs, no pressure, just for the diehards. And at those shows, they debuted 8 brand new songs.
8? That's not just a little experiment. That's basically a new album.
It was, and Travis Morrison confirmed it. He told a reporter they were back in the lab. And this led to their 5th studio album and their first in 12 years, Uncanney Valley, which came out in 2013.
I have to talk about the marketing for this album because it is so perfectly on brand for the Dismemberment Plan. They released the lead single, a song called Waiting, via a telephone number.
252-64-D-Plan. You literally had to call a phone number on a landline or your cell phone to hear the new song.
Who does that in 2013? We had Spotify, we had streaming. It was already the dominant way to listen to music.
It's just so them. It's tactile, it's mysterious, it forces you to engage in a different way. It's very much in line with their remix experiment ethos from a decade earlier, always doing things a little differently to create a unique connection with the fans.
So they release Uncanney Valley on Partisan Records. They release other singles like Invisible and Daddy Was a Real Good Dancer.
Great song titles. And the album showed a different side of them, maybe a bit calmer, a bit more mature. The anxieties were maybe a little different now that they were middle-aged dads instead of 20-somethings, but it was still distinctly them.
And then what happened? They toured the album.
They did. They played the final All Tomorrow's Parties Festival in England in November 2013. They played a big New Year's Eve show in Boston at the end of 2014, and then they just went quiet again.
They just slipped away.
There was no formal breakup announcement this time, no one last slice show, just a hiatus. They slipped back into the shadows.
Which brings us finally to the present day. Segment 7, The Modern Era, from 2023 to right now.
And for almost a decade, there was total silence. Nothing. It seemed like that was really it this time. But on January 31st, 2024, they just completely surprised everyone.
I remember this. It came out of nowhere. No warning, no press release, just a new track appeared online.
They released a cover of a song called Unrequited by the band Circus Lupus.
Circus Lupus, another classic DC band from that Discord Records scene.
Exactly. It was for a tribute album called Yesterday and Today. DC Does Discord, a compilation celebrating the legacy of that hugely important label.
And the liner notes said they recorded it in August of 2023, so they were secretly hanging out in a studio again.
They were. And that amazing cover song was just the appetizer. Because shortly after that dropped, they announced the 25th anniversary tour for Emergency and I.
6 reunion shows starting in September 2024. They're playing festivals like Best Friends Forever in Vegas and United Sounds NYC. They're back. Again.
It's amazing to see the longevity of this band. Think about it. They started as a bunch of college kids in 1993. Now, in 2024, they're a legacy act. They can disappear for nearly a decade, reappear with one song, and sell out venues instantly. The excitement is still there.
It really speaks to the quality of the music, doesn't it? It just doesn't sound dated. You can listen to Emergency and I today. It sounds like it could have been released yesterday by some cool new band in Brooklyn.
That's the benefit of their unique genre blending. Because they weren't strictly grunge or strictly pop punk or strictly emo, they didn't age poorly when those specific trends died out. They built their own sonic island, and it's timeless.
So let's try to wrap this all up. Let's put a bow on it. What does it all mean? What is the legacy of the Dismemberment Plan?
I think if you look at the big picture, they represent the ideal indie success story, but a weird version of it.
How so?
They maintained creative control almost by accident. They survived the major label meat grinder, that whole Interscope incident, and somehow came out winning. They cultivated a fan base that treats them like family, not just like content providers. And they did it all on their own terms.
Right. When they wanted to stop, they stopped. When they wanted to come back, they came back. There was no sense that they were chasing fame or money.
Not at all. And their willingness to experiment with technology and fan engagement, the remixes, the phone number hotlines, It kept them from ever feeling like a nostalgia act, even when they were playing reunion shows.
They didn't chase the trends. They kind of just waited for the trends to catch up to them.
Exactly. They avoided stagnation, which is the death of so many bands.
So here is the provocative question I want to leave our listeners with as we finish up.
Go for it.
They released that cover track in 2024 without any warning. They have a very long and established history of saying, we have no plans, right before they announce a massive plan. They said they wouldn't reunite. Then they did for charity. They said no new album. Then Uncanny Valley dropped out of the sky.
I see where you're going with this.
Are they just back for a quick anniversary tour?
Oh.
Could there be a 6th album secretly in the works right now? Are they back in the lab again, getting ready to slip through the cracks one more time?
With this band, you can absolutely never rule it out. Their entire history tells us that the plan is always subject to change.
I really hope so. For a band that sings so much about anxiety, their music brings a lot of people a weird kind of joy.
It really does.
So if you've never listened to the Dismemberment Plan, or if it's been a while, do yourself a favor. Go stream Emergency and I. Or better yet, buy the vinyl reissue. Check out that new cover of Unrequited. It rips.
And when you listen, pay very close attention to the drumming on a song like The City, or the bass line on You Are Invited. It is a masterclass in how a rhythm section can be both complex and groovy at the same time.
Thanks for diving in with us on this one. It was a blast. We'll catch you on the next one. Keep listening.
Goodbye.